This one, you can kind of see it's not attached anymore.
Okay.
And even right here, he's also almost slid, like his toe has slid forward more than I would like it off the tip of his shoe. And part of that was the application. Again, I didn't apply these, a student did. And when we were applying them, he had a really hard time putting his foot down nicely, and he slid it too far forward. So ultimately, this whole shoe should be about a 1/4 inch forward from where it is right now. But that's okay, we're gonna fix it. So we're gonna start by pulling these off, trimming tabs so that you can reuse them.
Probably just once is all you get if you could manage to read it.
There's 2 different kinds of tabs. There's these clear ones, and they also make a black one that's, although I have had a couple of these sets that I used the clear tabs twice.
So the black one's a bit more expensive then?
They are, yeah.
Okay.
So you obviously want to be really careful being down here like this that you don't get a knee in the face. It's really easy to forget you're working on a horse and just be busy working.
And the better tabs?
No, just thicker tabs. I find that typically once I do this application, the shoe stretches a little bit. Hi, big guy. I'm gonna do this one first because the reason I don't generally like reusing my tabs is the shoe isn't a perfect fit. And so I feel like I would rather re-weld new tabs on and have a better fit and a better application that I know I can count on than possibly having them come off.
And what is the cost of these? Just
The tabs come in a row of 11, and so like in this case I use 12, so you'd need 2 rows. And so on this particular application we had put this dental impression material in.
soft or?
This was extra soft, and so we'll pull that out. There's a bit of a dirt plug in here, we can take that out. But this is what our shoe looks like, and with him again it has a wedge in it, so it has a split down the back which provides flexibility, and in this case that wedge, but we're gonna do his next set without the wedge. And so this package here, I could grind these tabs right off and put new ones on and use the whole thing again.
I should look at what the new one looks like. I'm just trying to understand how the these attach to the shoe.
You're gonna see that.
Okay.
So we plastic weld them.
Oh, okay.
So we heat up the shoe and we heat up the tabs and we actually melt the plastic together.
Oh, okay. So you can.
So you'll see when I put the shoe on, I always pack the frog with Artemud underneath the dental impression material, and that helps to keep it nice and clean so it's not all fungusy and gross under here. So this is pretty nice. So now with this guy, let's just bring the toe back, preserve the heel height, and because we're putting this shoe on and everything's going to be trapped in here, I really want to clean up this bar that's laying over the sole and probably this ridge of sole. While normally with a barefoot horse I trim very little sole, it's a little bit different under a shoe. I want to make sure there's not going to be any pressure points in that sole that's going to hit that plastic and cause discomfort for him. So I do a lot more prep than I would if I were leaving him barefoot. If I were leaving him barefoot, I would still clean up my bars and kind of take this little lump out, but I wouldn't be as concerned with making that uniformed concavity around the edges.
And how the width of the shoe and
First one there, and then goes the hand. So it's really important to clean up all of this exfoliating sole and bar that lays over underneath that shoe. I don't want to leave those big lumps there.
How often do you sharpen your knife? Sometimes I'm wondering, is it technique or is it just that I'm not sharpening enough? Or
It's technique, I would say,
Okay.
because these are very old dull knives.
good technique then.
But trimming the bar and the sole and the frog is one of the hardest parts, though. Getting the right knack for it and being able to. For me, it's all from my wrist.
Okay.
And holding the knives, I always hold the knife with the blade coming out the bottom of my hand,
Okay.
never out the top.
Yeah.
I find when I go out the top, it becomes brute strength out of my shoulder.
Okay.
And then I end up accidentally slicing something off.
I never hold it that way. That's probably farther.
So I'm just cleaning this lump off.
Good with both hands.
Right, right. I'm trying to suck at that.
I just want to make sure I don't have any big ridges of sole up here. Because I'm going to put a shoe on there, I don't want too much pressure. In a barefoot horse, I would never ever clean this up like I just did. All right. I'm just a little bit high at the front of my heel on both sides. There we go. Attention to the trim and how much flare I would remove to improve this angle and the leverage on his hoof wall. He doesn't have a lot of flare at the sides, so that's nice. That's all pretty good.
As far as knowing how far you can go with that, like how much you can take, you're just looking at the angle from the top, but
Yeah,
when
there's...
you're doing too much to try to make it, to try to get rid of it, you know what I mean?
Well, obviously we're thinning the hoof wall in doing this.
Yeah.
So I want to be careful how much I thin the hoof wall. But at the same point, his particular hoof wall isn't doing him any favors when it's so flared and stretched forward. So my rule is typically, easy big guy, hold on.
You want to
Okay, I'll hold you up. So my rule of thumb is typically, if I divide this into thirds, I don't want to come up past that bottom third. On him, he's got, you can see how stretched his white line is. Because he's so stretched, I might go a little bit above my third, almost to half. But that's kind of my rule. Feet. But we also need to fix the posture and the riding, which contributed to it.
And so, because I know you used to use Ainsley, have you found somebody that does body work for you now, or?
No, I do it myself.
Okay. So I can take more than I'm usually doing at the front.
Good boy, hold on. There we go.
That's weird. You get
It's pretty easygoing, and is not a big deal to him. There's a couple other things too. The direction that you have it spinning, I want it spinning inward toward his hoof because it's going to blow the dust down, versus if I go the other way, it's going to blow the dust right up into my face. So I'm going to bring him forward onto my hoof stand just to make it a bit easier. And because we're using power tools, even though he's a good boy, I'm going to be mindful of how far underneath him I put my leg. Because he could spook or get upset and pull his leg back, and I don't want him taking my knee out. So when I use this, like you can still see there's a couple little marks there. There's still a little bit of dirt here and over here. I really want to take this whole outer layer off and make it really clean. This is really important for my glue. I would never do this barefoot because we're removing material we don't need to remove. But for the glue we do. Hold on, big guy. The great thing about this hoof buffer is you can come right up to the coronary band and it won't cut the coronary band. Now obviously if you held it there too long, that would be an issue. But I can go just carefully get all this periopal and stuff off the top, because if I tried to glue a tab over top of this, it would never stick.
And we're using the super glue on him this time?
We are, yeah.
Okay.
good.
I bet that's really worth the cost.
You could be standing a really long time with a block sander.
Yeah, I honestly, these are expensive. They're $131 plus tax.
Is that from the US that you have to get, or is it?
Yeah, yeah, I sell Easy Care products. I'm a distributor for
Oh,
them.
you got them, okay.
And so we retail this for 131 Canadian.
Okay.
Which is expensive,
Yeah.
right? Like,
Yeah.
and so I did not buy one, even though I sold them for a couple of years, and I was in there by hand, thinking, oh, how much better can it be? Oh my gosh, it's changed my world. I do not glue if I can't use it. It makes such a big difference. Not only, it's not about the work. Your glue lasts so much longer. That, hands down. Okay, so now that I've done this, I'm gonna be careful that how much handling on his hoof I do with my hands, because I'm gonna put oil on them. Now I'm still gonna come in and alcohol wash because there's dust all over that. I can't just straight glue here. Is the fact that it expands and contracts and you have independent heel suspension. And so if I'm using acrylic glue, this little piece of foam acts as a dam for the glue because the glue actually goes along the bottom and glues to the bottom as well as the sides. But if I'm using this shoe with 11 finger tabs, I just remove this piece of foam because I don't need it. And so with Odin, we'll cut these off and weld our new tabs on. That's one type of shoe and that's the one he was wearing. But we'll look at a couple others here too. And so this is a great shoe to use with the 11 finger tabs. I like it because we can weld our tabs on and then we can grind in more breakover. You could also nail this on. It is set up for nailing holes as well. I just prefer to glue. So that's another good one.
And would you consider nothing like changing them, right? But
This is the performance. You can't nail this on, you can only glue it on.
Okay.
What makes it my favorite is it's way softer than the NG.
Okay.
Like if we're talking about the hardness of the polyurethane, this is the softest one yet. We're gonna leave this in the bag because this is the one we're gonna acrylic glue later on. So I don't wanna get the oil from our fingers on it, but I want you guys to feel like how flexible this is. It's way, way softer than the other ones. And so what I actually like to do with this one, there's two different ways I apply it. I'll keep this cuff that it comes with and we'll glue that on with acrylic glue. Or I will cut this cuff off and I will weld on 11 finger tabs and glue it on as an 11 finger tab shoe.
and you wouldn't consider leaving that cuff and putting the 2 fingers and then
Not
using the
usually.
super glue?
Not usually, only because I feel like there's not enough gluing surface.
Okay.
But you could. If you were gonna do that, you would probably cut off the back of the tab, or the cuff, I mean, because this last ½ an inch of cuff is right at the, someone else can wear it 3 more times. So I can clean them up and I can reuse them as I need to. So I really like these ones with the flexibility, but if you need to be cost effective, this is an awesome alternative. There's a whole line. This is from the Versa line, and this is just the light. There's Versa Gold, Versa Grip. You can get studded ones. They're all great.
But nothing with the slit, nothing with the...
Nothing with that independent heel
Why
movement.
do you think they did that?
And, well, because if you remember back to how Odin's shoes looked like when we pulled them, they had stretched and the tabs were coming apart. That's because of the split. That would not happen with this shoe, and that's why Paula's horse's shoes looked so much nicer, because they don't have so much flexibility.
That's why her horse
She's
has
in
that.
these
Oh,
ones.
okay.
And so it's kind of like you have to factor in all these things into which shoe you're using. First, why are you using the shoe? Well, to add support and protection. I don't ever use a composite shoe without frog support. Well, I won't say never, but it's very, very rare. I did take a Flex Light, so this shoe would have looked like this. And I did cut the frog support out for a couple of horses that had prolapsed frogs. And so that happens when the back of the frog is so incredibly weak that it actually falls down. Like typically because they're peripherally loaded in a traditional metal horseshoe, the frog kind of falls down. And when you pull that and add support to that frog, they're really uncomfortable. Yeah. They're really, really sore. And so for the first couple of weeks, I would use something like this to keep that frog elevated until we could slowly apply pressure that we could either go barefoot or go to a composite shoe with frog support. But it's very, very rare I would use that, and only in those cases to work toward getting that frog stimulated again. My whole philosophy on hoof care is to weight all of the parts of the bottom of the foot, the frog, the bar, the heel, the sole, all of it collectively, not just peripherally load that outside. But there's lots of different things we can do, and these composite shoes allow us to be flexible. So These are probably my favorite because we get that expandability. Also, when you're fitting anything with 11 finger tabs, you want those tabs to be really, really tight on the hoof. You don't want any air gap in them. So what I like about these shoes is that I can actually size them a couple of millimeters small and then open them up to get them on. So those tabs are really tight against the foot. Versus the VersaGrip Lite, you don't have that ability. So you have to make it as tight as you can, but you don't get those extra couple millimeters. So there's lots of different shoes, and there's even more than this. But these are probably my favorite, with the lights being like the next best thing.
So you had mentioned that there's 70,
The Performance
the
and
Performance
the
NG are 72 each? Is that a pair?
That's a
or-
pair.
Oh,
Okay.
thank God.
Yeah.
They're
Okay.
always
That's-
sold in a
that's
pair.
what-
Right, that's what I thought. Okay.
Yeah. Yes,
Pairs
they
each.
come in pairs, and they come in 2 millimeter increment sizes. I think they start at 110 and they go pretty huge. And they do come in like a round shape and an oval shape. I typically only ever buy round because I like my hind feet and front feet to both be round. Hind feet are a little more pointy, but not, for me, pointy enough to warrant that oblong shape.
Right.
They're still pretty round by my standards. So
And it's perfectly okay to just put fronts on rather than if they don't need them on the hinds. I mean,
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
yeah, I'm not really worried
reason they
about
have to have
that
those.
half an inch in height difference, so it's all good.
I had a question.
Here, ooh, that actually looks small. I don't even know if I can get it on him. No, I think that'll be perfect. It's gonna be tight though. And these tabs at the toe are in my way, so they're gonna have to come off, which they were gonna come off anyway. So a lot of times I flip the shoe upside down so I can assess my fit. And so this is gonna be almost perfect right out of the bag for him. I'm gonna set it back a little bit from the tip of the toe, and I want it to be the same width as his hoof, or a millimeter smaller, because you have to remember you're welding the tab on the outside of this shoe. So we don't want it overhanging and pulling the base of our tab at all. And so this looks pretty good. This is a good starting point. It just tells me I need to go and cut these off and then fit my shoe again just to be sure.
So when you're setting it back, do you just go to the white line, the golden line?
I go to the off, so I'm going right back to the edge of his toe.
Okay.
And I'm just gonna check this one while we're here. Sometimes horses have 2 different size feet, so, and as it is, this one is a little big for this foot. So we'll see what it looks like once we've cleaned up the shoe and removed these tabs. It seems kind of a shame to take this nice shoe and then cut all of this off, but I really love the flexibility that this shoe provides. It's my absolute favorite setup.
And given that you're a rep, have they? I mean, you've probably, I'm sure, given them the feedback that it would be better without it. Like, would they consider making that shoe a little bit less expensive just by not putting all of the tabs? I mean, it would be nice if they just sold that, so you didn't have to overwork to take all the tabs off. Which
They did until, well, sort of. They sold what they called the Easy Shoe Flex Lite. And this was my all-time favorite Easy Shoe that they ever made, but they stopped making it. And what I love about it is how flexible the urethane is. It comes with no tabs, so I would just grind these little pieces off. And I didn't find the need for the hole because it's more flexible. Unfortunately, they stopped making them. And so I bought as many as I could in the sizes I use, and I reserve these for very special cases because they're my all-time favorite.
And with your feedback, did they have any thoughts on why they stopped it?
I think they preferred the flexibility in the Versa line. And you have to imagine, like, Easy Care makes so many amazing products.
Yeah.
They have so many molds and different things going on. They also had a problem sourcing their specific kind of urethane that they use as well. And so they just have to kind of concentrate their efforts on what they think is going to be the best product. So there was talk about a new version of the Flex Lite last year, but I haven't been updated on that. I'd love for them to come back with that because it was a really inexpensive shoe and it was my favorite. But most farriers or endurance riders that are using these shoes are using the acrylic glue over the super glue, and so they prefer the cuffs on these NGs anyway.
Just because they can do different tweaking.
Yeah.
And they're typically not leaving them on as long and.
Well, and again, there is many people who use acrylic glue very successfully, even in wet climates, but it's all about your hoof prep. And so I just find the super glue is so user friendly. I like it better. I also happen to be highly allergic to the acrylic glue, which is another reason I tend to not use it. So you just have to weigh out all those options. Okay, so now we've taken all of that excess off of our shoes. I'm gonna take my grinder and just smooth them, make sure there's no edges, because I didn't cut it totally perfectly. There's a little edge right there. And I wanna grind off these little nubs because they don't need to be there.
And with the prep that you did, would you have done even more if you were going to use the acrylic, or was that still pretty much level?
We're not done yet,
That's exactly right.
which is kind of funny. If they had done 12 finger tabs,
They're smarter than we think,
right? And so I'm just gonna use a Sharpie to make a little mark of where I'm putting my tabs, just so that as I'm melting them,
Oh, they stay together in the...
then I can't mess it up.
That's clever. I was thinking that it was each individual one.
Well, it can be, like, because they're 11 in a row, I always have little blocks of 2 I'll just cut one in half and I'll use them up that way.
That sure makes it easier for those 3 anyways, right? That
Yes.
They're not individual.
For sure.
Yeah.
And so I'm just making these little marks so that we can't get it wrong when we're welding them. And you never want to go and put your tabs right at the back, because again, this is going to be way too big on your heel bob with your low hairline here. You want to start kind of up here. And I want them somewhat even on either side, but they don't need to be totally perfect. Okay, so now I'm gonna heat up my heat gun. It takes a couple seconds to warm up.
I think I need something like this too.
This is amazing. It's a great workbench.
Yeah, no kidding. Yeah.
I can now move my camera bag out of the way there too.
Oh, I'm good. I just need the extension cord. That's all.
This is one I actually do have already, so that's nice.
Okay, so the most important part of welding the tabs and using your heat gun is this little reducer. You need to get this reducer to reduce your heat down to 8 to 9 millimeters.
Okay.
You won't be able to get it hot enough if you just use the broad end of the heat gun. So you definitely need the reducer. This one doesn't fit perfect, but it works.
I have a little embossing tool, but I don't know if it's quite that small.
And with this heat gun as well, every time you turn it off and on, you have to reset your temperature. So I just set it to max. On this one, it's 550 degrees Celsius. I have a different heat gun that goes up to 600 degrees, and I just use the max that the heat gun offers. I've also seen people do it with a torch if they didn't have a heat gun. You just need to be really careful not to overheat it. So I give it a couple seconds to warm up, and I'm gonna wear gloves as I do this, because as I melt the urethanes and squish them together, I want to use the palm of my hand to smooth it and bend it over, and obviously I can't do that to burning hot urethane without a glove on. And so just check, okay, we're hot. So I typically like to lay the gun down onto the table so that I'm not balancing it all in the air, and it gives me 2 hands to work that way, but you do want to be aware that you don't overheat the surface. And so what I'm looking for is I'm just going to heat the shoe until the urethane starts to become really shiny. It's not quite there yet. And I'm only going to do it in sections big enough to weld 1 tab on at a time. You can't, at least I can't heat the whole side of the shoe and the whole row of tabs and keep them warm enough and get them hot enough before it cools down and doesn't stick anymore. So I do 1 little section at a time. And I would rather do a little bit over my section than under my section. Because if you do under, it's not going to stick. If you do too much, you just have pre-melted your next one a little bit, which is not a big deal. Okay, so now that's starting to get clear, but it's not sticking to my glove, but I can make an indent. So I want to go just a tiny bit more. I really want these two urethanes to melt so much that they become one and you can't tell them apart. If I just heat this up a little and heat this up a little, they will stick. The problem is it's only going to last for 3 days. If you heat them both so that they melt and become one, then it won't come apart at all. I think a lot of people struggle with their tabs coming off because they undermelt them.
Just gonna quickly do some chicken and
Okay, so see how that's like really melting? Depends on your angle with the right light. This is the most time-consuming part of the whole process, is melting these tabs. So now I have my row of tabs, the tall one is at the front. I'm going to heat just this bottom portion, not the whole tab, just this bottom edge. And it has a little groove in it. I'm going to make sure that that groove is sitting right at the top part of the shoe. So the same as I melted the shoe, I want to melt the base of the tab until it's starting to turn clear and be really liquidy. I also want to make sure that I melt the joint in between so there's flexibility there. You can definitely over melt these and it'll fall off, which isn't a big deal. You can put it back on, you can use them individually, but you just want to be mindful of that. So see how that's getting clear and floppy? That way, that's how I know it's getting pretty close. And I'm just going to touch up my shoe and make sure it's warm as well. And I kind of hold them in proximity to the heat gun so they stay warmer.
Given that you're a rep, have they, I mean, you've probably, I'm sure, given them the feedback that it would be better without it? Like, would they consider making that shoe a little bit less expensive just by not putting all of the tabs? I mean, it would be nice if they just sold that so you didn't have to do all the work to take all the tabs off, which...
They did until, well, sort of. They sold what they called the Easy Shoe Flex Light. And this was my all-time favorite Easy Shoe that they ever made, but they've stopped making it. And what I love about it is how flexible the urethane is. It comes with no tabs, so I would just grind these little pieces off. And I didn't find the need for the hole because it's more flexible. Unfortunately, they stopped making them. And so I bought as many as I could in the sizes I use, and I reserve these for very special cases because they're my all-time favorite.
And with your thoughts on why they stopped it?
I think they preferred the flexibility in the Versa line. And you have to imagine, like Easy Care makes so many amazing products.
Yeah.
They have so many molds and different things going on. They also had a problem sourcing their specific kind of urethane that they use as well. And so they just have to kind of concentrate their efforts on what they think is going to be the best product. So there was talk about a new version of the Flex Lite last year, but I haven't been updated on that. I'd love for them to come back with that because it was a really inexpensive shoe and it was my favorite. But most farriers or endurance riders that are using these shoes are using the acrylic glue over the super glue, and so they prefer the cuffs on these NGs anyway.
Just because they can do different tweaking.
Yeah.
and they're typically not leaving them on as long and
Well, and again, there is many people who use acrylic glue very successfully, even in wet climates, but it's all about your hoof prep. And so I just find the super glue is so user friendly. I like it better. I also happen to be highly allergic to the acrylic glue, which is another reason I tend to not use it. So you just have to weigh out all those options. Okay, so now we've taken all of that excess off of our shoes. I'm gonna take my grinder and just smooth them, make sure there's no edges, because I didn't cut it totally perfectly. There's a little edge right there. And I wanna grind off these little nubs because they don't need to be there. I'm gonna throw the debris and make sure I'm not hitting anybody or myself. pretty happy with that. I just made a point of taking those little tabs off where they were sticking out, making sure I had no edge. I'm not going to do too much else until I go fit this to his hoof and make sure it's good. Because if I take too much off, I can't put it back on. Okay. So now I can really put this on here and make sure that it's not hanging over. I typically will fit the inside because the outside is easier to see. And see how it's hanging just a hair over his foot? Like just the tiniest bit. I'm gonna grind a little bit off of each side at the widest part of this shoe. Over this outside by about 2 millimeters. So I'm gonna grind a little bit more off of this one. In order to figure out which one's which. So now I have to be specific. It's his left front that's bigger. So I'm just gonna hold it in my left hand. That way I can go to my bench and put an L and an R on them.
Yeah.
Or grab a Sharpie and put it
Yeah.
on the bench, yeah.
It should be ground perfect. Set it right back to where I want it. It's perfect on the inside. It's perfect on the outside. I'm not super worried about a little bit of toe overhang because I can always rasp that off after. So that looks really nice. I'm satisfied with that. Doesn't come too far back his heel. Like say it came way back and overhung on the back, I'd be worried about him overreaching and ripping it off. So I would just grind a bit of the back if I needed to, but this is, for me, this is a perfect fit. That's exactly what I look for. This one is still too big. So if I use my finger to kind of cup the whole inside, I know it wouldn't be center, but at least it's lined up. I still have about 1 millimeter of overhang. So I'm gonna go and take a little bit. Now we're nice and lined up. I like that a lot. So hard to tell because his quarter is kind of split there, but I'm just kind of feeling for it to be lined up on both sides and not overhanging. Where I'm putting my tabs, just so that as I'm melting them,
Oh, they stay together in the.
then I can't mess it up.
That's clever. I was thinking that it was each individual one.
Well, it can be, like, because they're 11 in a row, I always have little blocks of 2 so I'll just cut one in half and I'll use them up that way.
That sure makes it easier for those 3 anyways, right? That
Yes.
They're not individual.
For sure.
Yeah.
And so I'm just making these little marks so that we can't get it wrong when we're welding them. And you never want to go and put your tabs right at the back because, again, this is going to be way too big on your heel bob with your low hairline here. You want to start kind of up here. And I want them somewhat even on either side, but they don't need to be totally perfect. You won't be able to get it hot enough if you just use the broad end of a heat gun. So you definitely need the reducer. This one doesn't fit perfect, but it works.
I have a little embossing tool.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know if it's quite that small.
And with this heat gun as well, every time you turn it off and on, you have to reset your temperature. So I just set it to max. On this one, it's 550 degrees Celsius. I have a different heat gun that goes up to 600 degrees, and I just use the max that the heat gun offers. I've also seen people do it with a torch if they didn't have a heat gun. You just need to be really careful not to overheat it. You can't do that to burning hot urethane without a glove on. And so just check, okay, we're hot. So I typically like to lay the gun down onto the table so that I'm not balancing it all in the air, and it gives me two hands to work that way. But you do want to be aware that you don't overheat your surface. Push that second tab in. And again, I'm just paying attention that the seam where the tab bends is at the top of my shoe. I don't care about the overhang down here on the bottom. I'm gonna fix that later. So I'm not placing my tab based on where that overhang is. And then just carefully peel that last one back. They have a new one coming out that has a cuff that's pre-attached, so that mostly for the acrylic process, you could glue this shoe on with acrylic. They have said you might be able to use super glue for it, but that only helps you the first time. Because as soon as you pull this off to reset it, you're gonna have to cut that off, grind it down, and put new tabs on anyway. So it would save you a little bit of time, but that's also assuming that your horse, their hoof shape, is the perfect size of that shoe as it comes out of the package, which with Odin, it was not, right?
So no grinding.
Because you wouldn't have the ability to fit that shoe to the hoof. And so that poses a challenge in itself. Why these ones with the split are so nice is you can go a little bit too small and stretch them to fit. So something like that would work. But the Versa Grip Light that doesn't have that ability would pose a challenge for sure with that. And so it's time consuming, but if you're only doing your own horse, well,
Maybe didn't know.
no, but you know, you can, and you'll kind of figure out what works for your horse as well, right? And so what I would normally do is trim the horse, prep the horse, throw some boots on him and turn him out. And then I would come in here and prep and weld and get everything ready, and then go get my horse and glue them on. Or even get my horse tomorrow and glue them on. So your horse isn't standing in the barn for 3 hours. You know, air bubbles along here. The only spot I have gaps is where there's the hole for the nails in the shoe. And so now I'm gonna come in, I'm just gonna angle this up. Let's see if it'll stay. And I'm gonna melt this ridge along the bottom and fold it over. I could probably cut it off. I just find I like to fold it over and really seal this whole union between the shoe and the tab.
I see why you go with the hottest heat, yeah.
Right?
Less time, and it's heating it before it cools.
See how that's getting really... I use this glove too, because now I can take my palm, squish it over. I'm gonna wait a second before I pull my hand off. If I pull my hand off right away, I'll rip a chunk of the urethane off and it'll be glued to my glove. But if I wait a second, it cools enough that it detaches from my glove.
It's never too hot for the glove?
Absolutely it can be. And then you quickly pull your glove off. So these gloves are like a medium thickness. And so for me, this works great. You could absolutely use a thicker glove, something more insulated. I like the texture on these particular gloves because it also doesn't stick super well to the urethane. There's another type of gardening glove that has a little more texture and a thicker base, and the urethane really sticks to those. So these are better for me.
I used a leather glove last time, and that worked really well with these as well.
And so again, it's all melted. I'm just gonna fold it over and squish it in and use like the base of my thumb to press it in, pull my glove off, and really squish it into these holes. And most of it's staying, like I have a little tiny bit on me. But then I'm really getting a solid weld. Like there, you can't tell where the shoe begins, you know, and the tab ends, it's all one. Any little bit of debris can get up in there. It's undoing all of your work, yeah. While I'm here, I'm just going to do this end as well, because that end piece is a seam, and I just want to squish that in as well. So I'm going to do the whole side. And peel my glove off carefully and squish down anything I lift up. And so I kind of got this one by accident when I did it, which is perfect. So I'm really happy with that. And if you accidentally melt any of your tabs and they're sticking out funny or are warped, just reheat them and hold them down and it'll be fine. They'll cool that way. So now I need to do the other side of this shoe. So while that's heating, then it's going to be that one.
Cautious you don't put them on upside down.
It's really easy to put them on upside down because you get in here and then you get in here and you're, oh no. But if you're quick enough, you can rip it right off. It's not the end of the world.
You still have your marks on there from last time, Paula?
You know, I need to like know somebody who has a horse with trade grooves, and I trade them the middle part, and I take them, you know, so they get the
Ariel.
I just cut the top off with my nippers.
Ariel is ginormous.
I don't think it would even matter. Like, the shorter tabs would work great on a big hoof.
Yeah.
They actually, I'm not sure that you really need those tall tabs.
I guess if it was only kind of a real flow, then it's just shorter tab would be better.
Yeah. Yeah, because you'll have less leverage on it, right? Anytime we can reduce the leverage on our glue bond, that's the key. You want the least amount of pressure on that and the perfect fit, that there's no room for any debris to get in there or anything like that. Okay, so that's pretty good. Start thinking of I try to hold this shoe and the tab right in the heat so that it doesn't cool down too quickly if I'm doing these in the winter. If I was really good, I could have 2 heat guns going at once, but I am not there. I just end up burning something down. Yeah.
I think that's right.
It's just because I'm impatient, right? And like I am doing something here, but I feel like this takes so long.
Should be automated.
Could I not make this process faster? Okay, and so I'm gonna stick that on, make sure my groove's where I want it. And see, you have a little bit of play when it's hot still to kind of wiggle it and put it right where you want it. So no air bubbles. It's all lined up for the next one. I'm happy with that. I need to rip this off right now. So I kind of push it forward into the bend instead of just like tear it back. Because you'll end up undoing what you just did. Yeah, and if it's a little tiny air bubble, honestly, I just don't even bother. There's not much you can do unless you pull the whole tab off and redo it.
But even if you cut from the outside of that?
Not usually. You usually just end up melting the outside. If it's like near the edge of the bottom though, then you sometimes can. So if it's a big bubble, like where I'm really missing a lot of adhesion on the tab, then I'll rip it off and redo it. But if it's a little one, I usually don't even bother. And like on Paula's shoes, because hers are used and dirty, there's going to be dirt in there and debris in there, and I don't even care. I just weld right over top of it, and I don't find it makes a big difference. As long as, I mean, we clean it as best we can, but as long as we really make sure the bottom of that tab bends over like I did, you're sealing all that dirt in there, and it's not affecting your bond.
You're probably going to grind some of it off anyway if your hoof is being trimmed appropriately.
Yes.
So it's downsizing versus upsizing. Upsizing is a problem, downsizing is good.
Yeah.
Until you get the so-called perfect hoop.
In which that perfect hoop shouldn't need the shoe.
Exactly.
Okay, so now we're gonna put, I really wanted to be thorough and melt this tab more. You could do the whole bending over in one go for each part. I never really bother. I kind of do that as my finish at the end. But if you heated the tab up enough, you could probably do that in one go.
So if there was any hope for contracted heels, would that change the size of your shoe? If the back of the hoop was to widen a little bit?
Not typically. It could.
Yeah.
It could change the shape. But typically when you have a contracted heel, it's only right at the back, and you still have that same width in the quarter.
Right.
And so really what you get when you put one of these on a contracted heel is we tend to trim the heels in more. And so that might make your shoe not fit.
Right.
But you're not going to see that much widening of a contracted hoof in such a short time.
The bones are...
That it's typically contracted feet don't widen. What the frog can get bigger and more robust, and the digital cushion can come back, but the bone has already finished growing. The bone is not going to change shape, so you don't get a significantly wider foot, at least not at the quarters where we actually worry about the width. And you can see I opted to put this tab just a tiny bit in front of my line, so I'm going to finish a tiny bit ahead of this line, but it doesn't really matter. I just decided I didn't like it that far back.
If you're thinking of the time you're supposed to do this, really it's not meant to be forever. It's only meant to be hopefully as a transitional tool, right? I mean, so that's something to remember.
Yeah, I've had horses in these shoes, you know, anywhere from 1 set to 2 years worth of rehab, where they no longer require them. My navicular comfortable. He was so lame he couldn't hardly walk. And then we started this, and now it'll be 2 years in August. He's just about ready to go barefoot. We've built up a strong frog and digital cushion. We fixed his disconnected hoof walls and his thin soles. So it was a huge process. That
I think it's like $200 per set, right?
$260 they're paying in Garmin.
Well, and I always break it up. Like I would trim the horse, use usually one of my old shoes. So it's not usually a brand new shoe that I'm putting on. And then I just go, okay, it fits. I can get rid of the horse. I can weld my tabs on. So like when I do like my evening feeding chores, I'll come and weld tabs on so that the next morning when I come out, I can grab my horse and glue the shoes on. I don't usually,
Yeah.
it's just the glue. The sole will start to thicken. But it's a big process. It's not simple. But addressing the trim is the first step.
I think that's one of your videos. The wall has to basically get to the base of the coffin bone before you're going to start developing any sole concavity, right?
Before you will develop concavity.
Come down.
And you have to find on more breakover if I wanted to. I'm quite happy with how these are though, as is. So I think we're just going to put them on like this.
Because they're already basically set back for your breakover, so
They're
you don't
already-
need to add more breakover.
Yeah, they're going to be set back a little bit, and it's just a nice shoe. I like how they've already set in that breakover. But I could also evaluate his movement for a couple of days and easily take my rasp and rasp a little more breakover in if I wanted to as well. But keep in mind, the more you rasp and take away material, the less this shoe's going to last for you, because he's going to wear breakover onto it as well. So I always kind of factor that in. Like when you've reset shoes a couple of times too, you will also have, like if your horse does not move perfectly straight, they'll wear one side a little bit more than the other. And so then I'm going to compensate by grinding the other one, which means those shoes aren't going to last as long. So I'm always just aware of the balance that the shoe is bringing if I'm reusing it, making sure that it's lining up to how I need their hoof to move. Okay, so if we had a lot of moisture and mud right now, I would also be torching his hoof, but his feet are really dry. We haven't had mud for a while. This is just alcohol. I just buy it in a jug from the medical supply store.
Is that 99% isopropyl or is
Yes.
it okay. So it'll evaporate quickly.
It evaporates quickly, and I'm using it for two reasons here. One, it takes any oil that I've put from my fingertips off, but I also use the rag because it pulls the dust off. And I'm not that particular. Like, this is the rag I use on my whiteboard. Like, I could use a clean one. I could use paper towel. But I'm just not that particular. I don't find the need for it. But with the acrylic glue, we need to be more cautious. So we're just gonna let that dry, and now I'm gonna put some Artemud in his feet. Artemud is an antifungal hoof clay that I use.
Yeah.
I'm gonna cut that tab down because it's too high. These ones on this side are all okay. So I'm just gonna dry. Good boy. So put my inside tabs under and then stretch them out. And that's where I really like this shoe because it pulls it apart.
And it's okay, I mean, it's just going, what, a couple millimeters apart?
Yep. And so now looking here, that tab is getting a little bit high. I'll probably trim the top off just because the coronary band is a little bit uneven here and I don't think it'll stick as well. Same with over here. I'd like to cut a couple of those shorter too.
So this is where it was important to set the foot down, not allow them to jam.
Yeah, this isn't super important because we could have fixed it.
Right.
It's more important once we put the dental impression material in and we're going to be actually gluing. So I'm,
Use them without the dental impression method?
yeah, you can. I just like to use it because it keeps the dirt and debris out.
Oh, right.
And also it just provides a little bit more padding. Glue bond though.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
I'm just going to take the top, just the tip off this one.
Sure, that's pretty fancy.
Wool.
Sweet, well, sweet.
And so I'm going to squish the Artemud into the deepest part of the collateral groove
Okay, my Artemud must be really old because it definitely doesn't go on that smooth.
and all the way to the tip of the frog. And then I'm going to put a thin layer on the frog. So if I were applying Artemud on a barefoot horse, it would look a little bit differently than this. I wouldn't necessarily smear it all over the frog. But something like that, I'm pretty happy with. Because we're putting dental impression material in, I don't want to fill these collateral grooves with Artemud. If I wasn't putting in dental impression material, then
I know, that sounds
and we swept this out too, so I'm not too worried about what's going to stick to this Artemud. There we go.
You don't put it in the separated part there too as well?
No, I'm not too worried about that. If I had trimmed his quarters down, that wouldn't be there. But because of the shoe, we needed that. We want that plastic wrap to be nice and tight. Okay, so right now we are in our 2-minute window of our dental impression material. Usually that's not the crunch, it's the glue, so I'm not super panicked. I'm gonna squish this in. And I really wanna make sure the bulk of it is in the back, but I wanna come all the way out the sole with a thin layer. Because if you think about this shoe having this opening in the middle, if you only put it at the back, I've had it fall through the shoe. But if I put it all the way under the sole, the shoe kind of holds it in for me. So something like that. Now I'm gonna place my shoe where I would like it. Make sure it's not crooked. And it's back at the edge of my breakover. I'm pretty happy with that. And so now I'm gonna ask him to put his foot down nicely. And what's important here is that he doesn't put the toe down and stab it, or he'll slide right off. And And so that was as perfect as it gets. I'm gonna, from the base of the tab up, and I use quite a lot of glue. I'm fairly liberal with it, and I would rather have it pouring out the bottom, and I'll clean it up later, than not have enough. Once I do all my tabs, I put a little dot on the hoof wall where the tab's gonna meet, and then I wrap it. I'm gonna pick it up to wrap it. Come on. So my 30-second window has already started. I need my horse to cooperate. And my plastic wrap to cooperate. And so I'm using this wrap to tightly pull those tabs into the hoof. This one is. I'm pulling it too hard that I'm tearing it because I want it tight. I'm just too aggressive with it. I'm going to do a little more for good measure. You can't use one with a spinning handle because you wouldn't be able to pull it tight enough. There. That's nice. So I'm happy with that. See how my dental impression material is exploding out? I want to come in here and squish this back in nice. If I have too much, like I could easily pull some out. That's okay too. I don't want to have too much pressure in there. Make sure my little keyhole's good. I'm pretty happy with that. That looks nice to me. So now he can wait this while the glue dries. I could take my knife and I could come in here and be a little bit more particular about how it looks. And it's not so much how it looks, it's that I don't want a lot of pressure right in this area. And so I can just remove a little bit of it, just like that. And now I could also just cut this and take the whole thing off. I tend to just unwrap it. Be mindful that there's still wet glue in here. So I have gloves on, I'm not worried, but also if I were to rub this hoof on my leg, we've also got quite a lot of glue fumes coming out of here, so don't put your head right underneath here. Now this is where I'm just going to take my glue, I'm just going to put a little dot, and I'm going to use my gloved hand to smooth it in, and that's just making sure that I have no little air gaps on these tabs where I didn't get any glue. And where we used the buffy on the front here, I'm just going to put a thin coating of glue just to seal everything. Just like that. So that one is all done.
Beautiful.
We're going to let that dry. It's going to take...
And is that just because it might have been thicker?
Yeah, it might be a little bit thicker. Maybe we didn't wait as long. I did more talking after I finished the other hoof. And so again, the fumes are coming out of here pretty good. I'm moving my head to the side so I'm not breathing that in.
It's time for a mask.
That looks nice. And then we'll just seal along each of these tabs. A little bit at the toe here. The inside. So I'm looking for any little air bubbles underneath my tabs. I have a little one right there on that middle tab on the inside. Not enough to warrant pulling this tab and re-gluing it though. If you had a huge air bubble, you could care really quickly. But I'm okay just to let them stand here a few minutes.
And that glue, does it last with in the bottle for